What are the fundamental challenges for China since modern times? Part 1 of China's Supercentury Confusion and Myth on the 7th theme on the column of Yuan Hongbing's Apricot altar. On the set. With the end of the Qing Dynasty as the starting point, China's national fortune was decaying and dilapidated. Chinese men with a pig's tail behind their heads and Chinese women with their insteps wrapped like meat dumplings were reduced to ugly and humble existence under the squint of the times. In the name of the poet laureate of Western philosophy, Hegel even declared that the Chinese people were a race of slaves, so the national humiliation became a tattoo engraved on the bones of the Chinese people, making China strong again and winning the respect of the world again, which was defined as the connotation of the Chinese dream. Under the above historical background, the pseudo-class, pseudo-liberal intellectuals, and pseudo-public intellectuals in contemporary China assert that the most fundamental challenge facing modern China is to rebuild a strong nation-state, which is made by the pseudo-class in order to create an ideological premise for their other assertion. Another argument that belongs to the false category can be expressed as follows: now that the Communist Party of China has made China the second largest economy in the world and become a military power, the Communist Party of China has successfully overcome the first fundamental challenge facing modern China, that is, to complete the historical mission of rebuilding a strong nation-state. Obviously, the conclusion that the fundamental challenge facing China since modern times lies in rebuilding a strong nation-state is to build an iron monument for the tyranny of the Communist Party of China built on the bones of the Chinese people. So how should we understand the primary fundamental challenge facing China since modern times? With regard to this important issue of destiny, China's thinking has been sleepwalking in confusion and myth. The contemporary pseudo-liberal intellectuals and pseudo-public intellectuals, as mentioned above, are the ideological fraud of the Communist Party of China's tyranny for the public, in an attempt to make the Chinese people more deeply trapped in the confusion and myth beyond the century, unable to extricate themselves. According to the concept of pseudo-class, the fundamental destiny challenge or the primary historical mission facing China since modern times is to rebuild a strong nation-state, and the great fallacy contained in this concept of pseudo-class can be summed up in a word, that is, to regard the nation as a biological existence. Hidden behind this fallacy is the most gloomy understanding of human nature, that is, to attribute human nature to materiality, to deny that human beings are essentially the expression of the soul, the existence of the spirit, and the crystallization of culture, to attribute human nature to materiality, and to regard the nation as a biological existence, which will inevitably lead to a logical effect. That is to inject the principle of pragmatism into the powerful historical mission of the nation-state. As long as the nation-state can be strong in the material sense, it can destroy the natural principles, human nature, abandon the pursuit of beauty and justice, and betray the call of the soul and the cultural motherland. The above-mentioned principle of materialistic pragmatism to realize the strength of the nation-state is the focus of the devil's nature of the tyranny of the Communist Party of China. In order to realize the strength of the tyranny of the Communist Party of China, which is based on the will of Mao Zedong's individual rights, and to obtain the ability to burn down the fate of mankind with nuclear flames, the Chinese Communist Party's tyranny has imposed excessive taxes and exhausted its resources, resulting in an unprecedented famine between 1959 and 1962. The bodies of 40 million farmers have been buried in the wilderness, and the East Asian continent has become a graveyard of thousands of miles. To this day, the Communist Party of China's imperial literati and the devilish leaks of Wu Mao, Pink, Warwolf, and Lost Soul have not yet acquired nuclear weapons capability at the cost of 40 million people becoming evil prostitutes. In their distorted values, the flattering eulogies to the tyranny of the Communist Party of China can be ignored as long as they are physically strong. Their hearts are like dead wood and stone, without a trace of humanity. In the era of Deng Xiaoping and Jiang Zemin, in order to achieve the goal of economic strength, Deng Xiaoping designed and implemented the elite market economy with material greed without moral bottom line as the original motive force and autocratic power as the axis. As a result, China has become the second largest economy in the world, but the price paid has become a century-old curse to China's future destiny. The destructive exploitation of natural resources and the natural environment has reduced China to a land of poisonous gas and sewage. What is more tragic is that the Communist Party of China's elite market economy has lost its conscience. The devil's temptation, which can only understand the call of materialistic and greedy pragmatism, quickly makes the state power of the Communist Party of China rot to the bone. Under the instigation of the rotten state power, Chinese society is frantically pouring into the era of moral decay in which instinctive pleasure is the king of value. Under the guidance of tens of millions of corrupt officials of the Communist Party of China, the hearts of contemporary Chinese people have rotted and become an existence outside morality. China has gained economic strength but has lost the protection of moral conscience and become an animal dominated by animal instinct. It takes 10 years to grow trees, but 100 years to cultivate people. If the Chinese people want to return to the existence of morality as a whole, they still need to go through at least 100 years of difficulties. As for the Xi Jinping era, in order to continue the survival of the Communist Party, China is being driven into the territory of Mao Zedong's fundamentalism, which we have discussed very well before and will not repeat here. So is the pseudo-assertion that the Communist Party of China has fulfilled its mission of rebuilding a strong nation-state true or fraud of thought? What does the so-called strength of contemporary China mean? Not many of the 1.4 billion Chinese people can answer the above questions soberly, which is the most depressing part of China's supercentury confusion and myth. In the next lecture, we will focus on the discussion of this question. What does the so-called strength of contemporary China mean?